This video course was created by Invictus Technology Services for the purpose of helping people learn Microsoft 365 topics. We do not represent Microsoft and will be using publicly available information to create this course. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. Part 3. Prepare an Identity and Authentication Solution. This module provides an overview of the key areas that organizations need to consider when designing identity and authentication solutions for their Microsoft 365 tenant. By the end of this module, participants will be able to understand how authentication works for Office client apps connecting to Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and Skype for Business Online, implement multi-factor authentication in a Microsoft 365 deployment, plan for directory synchronization in Azure AD Connect pass-through authentication, understand how password hash synchronization supports cloud authentication, and learn best practices and benefits of federated authentication using Active Directory Federation services and Azure AD single sign-on. In this module, you will also learn how to plan and design the identity and authentication solution for your Microsoft 365 tenant. This includes understanding the key areas that must be taken into account, such as directory synchronization, Azure AD Connect Sync, Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync, Azure AD Connect Pass-Through, ADFS deployments, and Azure Active Directory Single Sign-On. Whether you're moving your entire service to the cloud or implementing a hybrid environment, this module will provide you with the knowledge you need to make informed decisions. After completing this module, you'll be able to understand the authentication behavior for Office client apps when connecting to Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Skype for Business Online, with or without modern authentication. Explain how to implement multi-factor authentication in a Microsoft 365 deployment, create a plan for directory synchronization and Azure AD Connect pass-through authentication, understanding the issues, benefits, and recommendations when implementing federated authentication using ADFS, and plan for Azure AD single sign-on. Understanding your cloud identity model. This passage explains the role of Azure Active Directory in managing identities and authentication for Microsoft 365. Azure AD is a cloud-based service that is included with the Microsoft 365 subscription and is essential for managing user access and permissions within an organization. There are two main models of identity used in Microsoft 365, cloud-only identity, in which all identities are managed within the Azure AD tenant, and hybrid identity, in which identities are managed in an on-premise Active Directory domain services and used for authentication when accessing Microsoft 365 cloud services. This provides details about the attributes, best uses, and benefits of each model, and also mentions the use of directory synchronization tools such as Azure AD Connect Sync and Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync for hybrid identities. MFA needs for your tenant. Multi-factor authentication is a security method that requires more than one verification method to confirm the identity of a user. This adds an extra layer of security to user sign-ins and transactions. MFA can use different methods such as randomly generated passcodes, a phone call, an SMS message, a smart card, or a biometric device. Microsoft 365 uses MFA to provide extra security, and it can be managed from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. It offers a subset of the Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication capabilities as part of the subscription, such as the ability to enable and enforce MFA for end users, using a mobile app or a phone call as a second authentication factor, and application passwords for non-browser clients. Additional features can be obtained by purchasing the Azure Active Directory Multi-Factor Authentication service. Office Device Apps supports MFA through the Microsoft Authentication Library. However, it is important to note that support for the older Azure Active Directory Authentication Library will end in June of 2023, and organizations should migrate to MSAL to ensure security. The type of MFA options and capabilities available to an organization will depend on whether they have a cloud-only deployment for Microsoft 365 or a hybrid setup with single sign-on and Active Directory Federation services. Multiple forest authentication. When dealing with multiple sign-in forests for an organization, it is highly recommended to evaluate combining the forests, as it can add more overhead to maintain multiple forests. If your organization does not have security constraints that require separate forests, consider simplifying the on-premises environment. Also consider deploying the Microsoft 365 only in the primary sign-in forest for the initial rollout. Hybrid deployments using Exchange 2010 or later are supported in integrations with multiple on-premise Active Directory forests and in a single Microsoft 365 tenant. However, there are certain prerequisites that must be met, such as ensuring proper auto-discover and certificate configurations. It's important to note that a single-digit certificate cannot be used for multiple Active Directory forests in a multi-forest hybrid deployment. Each forest must use a dedicated, globally trusted certificate. If the organization has shared domains across multiple Exchange forests, both mail routing and auto-discovery endpoints must be configured and working properly before configuring the multi-forest hybrid deployment. Choosing an authentication method for hybrid Active Directory. When moving an organization's app to the cloud, choosing the correct authentication method is a crucial decision that shouldn't be taken lightly. The chosen authentication method controls access to all cloud data and resources and is a critical component of an organization's presence in the cloud. It also forms the foundation for all advanced security and user experience features in Azure AD. Organizations with an existing on-premises directory footprint need an identity control plane that strengthens their security and keeps their cloud apps safe from intruders. Changing the authentication method requires planning, testing, and may potentially cause downtime. Organizations that don't have an existing on-premises Active Directory footprint typically don't require a hybrid identity solution. Azure AD supports various authentication methods for hybrid identity solutions, including cloud authentication and federated authentication. Each method has its own set of time, infrastructure, complexity, and cost considerations that organizations must evaluate before choosing the best method for them. Multi-factor authentication is a method of authentication that requires the use of more than one verification method. By doing so, it adds a second layer of security to user sign-ins and transactions. MFA works by requiring any two or more of the following verification methods: a randomly generated passcode, a phone call, a short SMS message, a smart card, virtual or physical, a biometric device. Multi-factor authentication in Microsoft 365 provides extra security. MFA in Microsoft 365 is managed from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and offers a subset of Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication capabilities as a part of the subscription. The ability to enable and enforce multi-factor authentication for end users, the use of a mobile app, online, and one-time passcode or OTP as a second authentication factor. The use of a phone call as a second authentication factor, the use of a short message, an SMS message, as a second authentication factor, application passwords for non-browser clients, for example, the Microsoft Link 2013 communication software, default Microsoft greetings that are provided during authentication phone calls. For the full list of added features, see Features and Licensing for Azure AD Multi-Factor Authentication. You can always get the full functionality by purchasing the Azure Active Directory Multi-Factor Authentication service. Understanding password hash authentication. Password hash synchronization is a method of authentication that involves synchronizing the hash of a user's password from an on-premises Active Directory to Azure Active Directory. This allows users to use the same username and password for both on-prem and cloud-based resources without the need for additional infrastructure. One of the main benefits of using password hash synchronization is its high availability and disaster recovery capabilities. Unlike pass-through authentication and federation with ADFS, which rely on an on-premises infrastructure, password hash synchronization utilizes the Microsoft Azure AD Cloud Authentication Service, which scales globally and is always available. This means that even in the event of an on-premises outage caused by a cyber attack or disaster, users will still have the ability to access their cloud-based resources using their existing username and password. Furthermore, organizations that have enabled password hash synchronization have been able to quickly recover from on-premises outages and get back online in a matter of hours, while organizations that have not enabled it have had to resort to untrusted external consumer email systems for communications and issue resolution, taking weeks or more to be up and running again. Another important benefit of password hash synchronization is identity protection. Azure AD Identity Protection scans the internet for user and password lists that bad actors sell and make available on the dark web, and can use this information to verify whether any of the usernames and passwords in an organization are compromised. Leaked credentials are presented as a report, which can then be used to block or force users to change their passwords when they try to sign in with leaked passwords. It is important to note that when implementing password hash synchronization, only the password hashes are synced. The actual passwords are not synced. The rest of the attributes, such as the user's full name and UPN, are kept in sync. Understanding pass-through authentication. Pass-through authentication, or PTA, is a method that enables organizations to validate users' passwords directly with their on-premises Active Directory. This allows users to sign in to both on-premises and Microsoft 365 resources and applications using their on-premises account and password. PTA is useful for companies that have a security requirement to immediately enforce on-premises user account states, password policies, and sign-in hours. With PTA, users can enjoy the benefits of single sign-on, which automatically signs them into Azure AD when they are on their corporate devices and connected to the corporate network. When planning for PTA, organizations should consider the benefits, features, supported scenarios, and unsupported scenarios. The benefits of PTA include users being able to use the same password for both on-prem and cloud-based applications, less time spent resolving password-related issues with help desk, and no need for complex or on-premises deployments or network configurations. PTA also provides security benefits such as on-premises passwords never being stored in the cloud and working seamlessly with Azure AD conditional access policies. The features highlights of PTA include support for user sign-in to all web browser-based applications and Microsoft Office client applications that use modern authentication, support for alternate usernames and integration with cloud-based self-service password management. PTA is also a free feature that can be enabled through a directory synchronization tool and uses a lightweight on-premises agent that listens for and responds to password validation requests. The supported scenario for PTA includes user sign-ins to all web browser-based applications, Office applications that support modern authentication, Outlook clients using legacy protocols, and Skype for Business that support modern authentication. However, PTA is not supported in scenarios such as user sign-ins to the Office 2010, Office 2011 for Mac, and non-browser-based applications such as the Azure Classic Portal, Azure PowerShell, and Azure SDKs. Understanding federated authentication and ADFS. When you choose a federated authentication method, Azure AD is still responsible for synchronizing user accounts. However, it hands off the authentication process to a separate trusted system, such as an on-premises Active Directory Federation Services, or ADFS, to validate the user's password. ADFS allows secure sharing of identity information between trusted business partners across an extranet, using AD domain services for authentication. In a federated authentication solution, when a user needs to access a web application from one of its federated partners, the user's organization is responsible for authenticating the user and providing identity information in the form of claims to the partner hosting the web application. The hosting partner then uses its trust policy to map the incoming claims to claims that its web application can understand and use for authorization decisions. Federated authentication can provide advanced authentication requirements such as smart card-based authentication or third-party multi-factor authentication. However, administrators must keep in mind the effort required to maintain and manage the external federated system, the potential impact on user experience, and the need for advanced scenarios. It is also important to consider business continuity and deploy password hash synchronization as a backup authentication method in case the primary method is not available. Federated authentication solutions also require a significant investment in on-premises infrastructure. Organizations usually choose this option if they already have an on-premises federation investment or a strong business requirement to use a single identity provider. In summary, this module provided an overview of the steps and considerations involved in planning for the deployment of a Microsoft 365 tenant, with a focus on the identity and authentication solution. It covered key areas such as directory synchronization, Azure AD Connect Sync and Pass-Through, ADFS deployments, and Azure Active Directory single sign-on. By the end of this module, you should have a better understanding of the importance of properly configuring your identity infrastructure and managing user access and permissions for your organization using Azure Active Directory.